said he was going to run the show. I talked to him earlier, but I
know it's 4 o'clock. We need to get started.
All right.
Is the chief on? I gotta.
Okay, let's hold back for a minute.
Someone request the chief? This is Sharon.
Or whoever is doing,
Renee.
gonna do the presentation. I know there was an email earlier.
Well, the CRB will be Renette.
Oh, the CRB is first. I'm
Right.
okay.
That was a
Wow, I
good
literally talked to Chol about him running it.
that sound,
so
Brad.
Renette, do you want to introduce your budget and just kind of go over the activity indicators and your accomplishments and challenges and all of that?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to have our budget meeting today. It does appear that we have our board chair, Peter McCarthy, on the line. I did provide the information so our board members could use the call-in feature or also be on this call. So I wanted to mention that. Our budget is on page 62. And in terms of operations, last year we had a total of 100 cases to come into the CRB. We held 7 panel hearings and we had 12 public board meetings. We attended 3 conferences in terms of the CRB administrator and attended 2, which included our national conference, the National Association for Civilian Oversight and Law Enforcement, and also the Dago Law Group's conference for their Use of Force Summit. And the board had their annual one-day conference together. In terms of community outreach events, we held 47 outreach events for the year of 2019. That included appearing at all the TNT meetings for each TNT sector and appearing at other events throughout the city. In terms of the number of cases processed, we processed 50 cases last year. We have 1 seat currently open on the board, and that's the 2nd Council District. We've utilized our private investigator funds in the year of 2019. And for the upcoming budget, we had requested a research aid for the CRB and a raise for me. And as of right now, I did see that the research aid was off the table and also a raise. And so that's what we have currently. Currently in the office as full-time staff, we have our program coordinator, which lists as me, and a legal secretary. So currently in the office on a full-time basis, we have 2 people.
Do you have any more about, I don't know, general? I don't have any more questions personally. I think we give like a half hour to an entity with 2 people, and then we give an hour to an entity with hundreds. But
Chol is back now.
Okay.
So Councilman Joke is on now, so he.
Oh, good. Chol can take over.
Sorry, I had an issue with my connection.
Renette, I want to ask you a question. So I'm looking at the average of cases. Is it 100? Is that the average?
Yeah, typically we have 100 cases throughout the year. The lowest amount of cases that we had was in 2018, which was 83. So typically about 100 cases. Our highest year was 118 cases in 1 year. So typically around 100.
Okay, and before I get off, I just want to say this. I just want to say I know that everybody is working in unprecedented times right now. I want to say thank you because we know that as a city, we're going to have to look across financially and see where we're going to land. So I know there's a lot of things that's gonna be off the table right now, but hopefully at some point we'll be able to revisit a lot of things. Because I think as moving forth with legislation and with things we want to see with the city and building the city, we're not going to be able to do it. And that's just the way it is. Because we took a deep hit and we have to be conscious of that. And I just want to say, I appreciate you being a team player and we'll all work this out together.
Thank you, President Hudson. I would like to say that with regard to the inner workings between the CRB and the police department, we did have some outstanding cases for 2017, 2018, and 2019. We still do carry some outstanding cases for those years, and currently we are working with the new individuals in the Office of Professional Standards to improve those numbers. They are turning over some more documents on 2017 and 2018 cases. And we're seeing an improvement there with regard to that, but we still have a ways to go to get rid of the backlog that we currently have.
I have a couple questions. One, and I may have missed this part. I was clicking on the wrong link, so I didn't have technical difficulties, but I went the wrong way. From fiscal year, I see the end of fiscal year 20 was an increase, 100,000. I'm looking at 98,000 beginning July 1, I believe, and then 102 going into the top of 21. I may have missed this. If I did, forgive me, but can you make the increase?
So there was an increase based upon the increase in my salary. My salary went from 57,000 to 61,000 during that fiscal year, which creates that personnel services to go up a little bit. We also increased money with regard to our travel and training expenses, because when we go out of town to go on other training events, it's been a little bit more expensive. So we didn't have enough money to cover that. So that went up a little bit. And so those would account for the increases in our amount. Our legal secretary had went from a full-time position to a part-time at one point in time. So we did accrue a little bit of a part-time expenses with regard to that. And those were kind of the changes that created a little bit more money being spent.
So I know I heard you right. You said the legal secretary was reduced from full-time to part-time?
Yeah, she had provided us with notice. We have since hired a full-time legal secretary, but she did go on, the previous legal secretary did go on a part-time basis for a period of time as she was getting a new job. So then now we have a full-time, we're back at a full-time capacity for our legal secretary.
All right, so the increase from fiscal year 20 to 21, I mean, from 20 going into 21, 98 to 102, you're saying that's because of travel?
Some of it is because of travel and because we put more funds in our professional services budget, a little bit more with regard to that, so we could utilize the private investigator that we hadn't been previously utilizing. But most of it is, if you look at the numbers, most of it has to do with our professional services and travel and training.
And who's traveling and training?
So I attend 2 conferences a year. The National Association for Civilian Oversight and Law Enforcement. It changes every year as to the location. Like this year's event was supposed to be scheduled for Tucson, Arizona, but due to COVID-19, it changed. They actually canceled the national conference. So depending on where it is, the amount gets to be a little bit different depending on flights and hotels and things of that nature. I also now attend the Dago Law Group's Use of Force Summit, which is in Connecticut. And so there were expenses there with regard to travel and things of that nature.
Are those the only 2 times you travel?
Those are the only 2 times that I travel, yes. The other training that's provided is just to the board, and that's locally. We were going to have a outside consultant to come to our most recent training, but we had to cancel that due to COVID-19. So we were going to have an expense with regard to that.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. I mean, considering the circumstances, I don't think anybody's traveling anywhere right now. So,
Right.
I mean, it's the same. It's, you know, is it necessary to increase your travel budget considering the circumstances? Because nobody's going anywhere.
Right. So now, given the fact that our national conference has been canceled, then the travel budget could decrease because we won't be attending that one in Tucson, Arizona. So when we looked at the expenses of what that was going to cost us, we looked at that. So that is going to be off the table for the budget this year. So we'll just have one training, which usually occurs in December.
On the subject of 100 cases a year, it's a lot.
Yes.
And so for all intents and purposes, that leaves you about, what, 3.5 days to investigate each one if you look at it from that perspective?
Yeah, so it would make me really need to, since the board only has a meeting every first Thursday of the month, technically we should be reviewing about 10 cases a month in order to keep on track with, processing those accordingly. So that would mean that ideally I would do 2 cases a week in order to make sure that we have enough time. So put that into perspective with just the day-to-day operations of the CRB meetings and things of that nature. That's why we've been utilizing our private investigator. We had them to process, we used 3 different firms this year. And we cut down on the 3 firms down to 1, and they processed a total of 16 cases for us this year. We'd like to use them a little bit more, but based upon the budget, we really can't. Because the current private investigator's budget is for $5,000, and we're already halfway through that budget right now with the number of cases he's processed.
I guess I'm trying to, and I'm just asking, kind of just to get an understanding and due respect. Is it really practical to say that you get 100 even every single year?
No, it's not practical. So 100 is probably about average. We have had 83 cases in the year of 2018. We had 118 cases, between 118 or 116 cases for 2017. So that's just kind of like right dab in the middle. So we kind of put it at that, because then if we go high or we go low, we're right in the middle of where we could be.
Got you.
In general, I would say that's a problem with the budget format, because it presents 3 columns: the actual, the estimate, and then the proposed. So because most people at the estimate remain what the actual was the year before, and then most people propose the same thing. So over and over across all departments, we tend to have the same numbers in those columns, which makes it.
I just think I think we have to give consideration with all of the discussion about COVID-19. One of the things we obviously can't do is increase, in any real way and across departments. Obviously, it's necessary to make cuts when you consider that at least as far as we know right now, we're going to take approximately a $20 million hit on sales tax. Our budget won't be the same necessarily. So to ask for increases and the like, with all due respect, depending, may not really fit the circumstance. So I think I'm just putting that out there for your consideration. Wherever it's not needed, for example, when having at least one of your conferences canceled, which I'm inclined to think both of them will be, you may not need that for a travel budget, to be quite frank, and we can use that somewhere else. But just mentioning that as an example for your consideration. That's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman.
Is it possible to get the actual numbers? Because I'm sure you have those like on file somewhere. So instead of looking at it just with 100 for each, can you somehow send us the actual number of cases each year?
Yes, so I can give you the a breakdown. I can send it to you by email with regard to each year so far
Okay.
since I've been there. So I can break it down from, would you like 2017 through 2019?
Yeah, that'll be fine. Yep. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, Raynette, you said you still had outstanding cases from 17, 18, and 19 with the police department. You know how many each year you have out there?
I do. We originally had 25 cases that were outstanding from 2017. And some of those cases, as we are reviewing the change in personnel, some of those 2017 cases are now going to become 2020 cases for the Office of Professional Standards, because for some reason they were not located by the new staff. So as we look at those cases, we're going to be dropping some of them down. And so, which would mean that they're going to have more work in 2020 on those 2017 cases, which is really disheartening for the complainant, because some of them were assumed to have been completed in 2017, but not provided to your office. So I can give you the numbers based upon that. We would be taking off We'd be taking off 9 from 25 that we had outstanding.
Okay, so can you give me the breakdowns? How many? 8 and 17, 10 and 18, how many in each year?
Yes, I can send you that as I'm still getting some of them from the Office of Professional Standards. I can send you a breakdown along with that, all of those in that same email that I send related to the 2017 and 2018, those other numbers. I can provide that to you.
And roll over to 2020. Roll over how many are going to end up on 2020?
Yes, I can do that as well.
Renee, for how long can you keep a case open?
So technically, we can keep a case open for as long as it is until it's closed. But the issue is that the officers cannot be disciplined if it's outside of the 18-month time frame. So now we're running into cases from 2017 that the officer, could potentially not be disciplined because of how late it is that they are investigating the case. But we tried not to use the 18-month deadline as a deadline, but based upon what we're looking at right now with these outstanding cases, it becomes a clear factor. We would like to adhere to the current legislation, which says that we have a total of 60 days to complete everything on our end, in terms of 30 days to investigate. And then once it comes back, we have another 30 days. The process is only supposed to take 90 days. But as of right now, it is not. It's taking way more than 90 days because of the time frame that it's spending with the Office of Professional Standards.
Thank you.
May I add something?
Yeah.
This is Peter McCarthy. The numbers that Renette report are the cases that we know about. There may be cases that Office of Professional Standards has that we've never seen. And the staff there, Lieutenant Izzo, is trying to catch up on those. So but it's possible that we may not have up-to-date numbers for some of their cases. So those numbers may change.
Questions? So I have one, Raynette. So I see that professional services, you look at 2019, the actual was 7,000, right? You see that?
Yes.
Okay, and then for the 2020, it jumped to like 17,000. Now, is that with the professional services? And sorry if I'm taking you back. Is that where your training and your assistant training are included?
Yes, that's where our use of force training comes in. That's where our NACO training comes in. And also where, as a board, we are considered an organization under the National Association for Oversight and Law Enforcement. So with that, that's another $400 expense that we pay every year to be a member of that group. So those are all included under there. And then we have a private investigator that we use and also our outside counsel that all fall under that professional services line, which we are utilizing more often.
What is the average cost of the private investigator a year? You know?
So as of right now, so one group that we used, which was PIB investigations, that their total number that we spent on them was $1,632.50. And then we used another private investigator, Petrie, and that was $1,143.50. And our current Freeland investigation services, so far we've spent with them $2,997.63. So those numbers are what's being reflected there as to our expenses. So our professional services, in terms of our private investigator and also our outside counsel. And on our outside counsel, we've had a great number of conversations lately with the outside counsel, Kristen Smith, with regard to some things. So we have been utilizing the funds. We have been utilizing the funds more often with regard to that.
Okay, and to your knowledge and the knowledge of the board, that these investigators are effective?
Yes, so so far the private investigators have reviewed 16 cases based upon the amount that we have allotted for them. That's what we can spend, because if not, we go over the budget line for them. Like Freeland Investigation Services, we only allotted $5,000 for them. So technically, throughout the rest of the budget year, we only have $2,002.37 to spend with them. So I have to kind of account for those types of expenses and also look at the number of cases that we utilize for them because we're going to go over the budget.
Councilors, is there anyone else with questions?
No, sir.
Well, Raynette, we want to thank you for coming. Peter, thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we can wait for the next one at 4:30. But
Yes, sir. Just pause your microphones and mute your camera if you want to.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, counselors, for taking the time to let me present my budget. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome.
We should get going. It's 4:30. I want to thank the police department for coming. Are we all here?
Yes, sir. We are here, Councilman Joe.
Okay. Tim Robbins here, I take. Tim?
I'm here.
Councilor Driscoll?
Here, sir.
And and the rest of the team. Chief, thank you. Take it away.
All right, sir. Thank you for having us here. We, of course, appreciate the opportunity to present to you. I'd like to, before we take your questions, I'd like to give you a few minutes of an overview of some things, some of which are historical questions that you all are concerned or annually ask about. So we'll provide some of that in this brief overview. And then we'll be more than happy to dig into get to what specific questions that you have. With me, I have our executive staff that's on the conference with us as well. So there may be some instances where I will lean on one of them to be able to provide you a more intimate answer. We're ready when you are. You ready, sir?
Go ahead, Chief.
Okay. So first, I want to start. Did you all receive a copy of the slides that was supposed to have been emailed to you? Did you get a copy of those?
Yes.
We did.
Okay. Okay, good. So before we do anything, I'd like to, because we're very proud of it, in the January of this year, we had our first executive workshop to where we went and we worked on our 2020 goals for the year. And also as a part of that process, we developed a new mission statement that was reflective of this administration. That mission statement reads, it is the mission of the Syracuse Police Department to prevent crime, enforce the laws, and understand the needs of the community while providing professional service with ethical treatment for everyone. This is the first time that we publicly have used that mission statement. It will be up on our social media platforms, including our new website that we're working on. But I thought it was important to share that. Not listed in your slides is some COVID-19 information. Given the times that we're in, we thought it was important to give you a little bit of an idea as to what's been going on with your police department in these unparalleled times that we're in. Some key information. So during this period, and this was as of the end of last week, we've had 9 police officers that have been tested for the coronavirus. We've actually sent home 16 officers for a variety of reasons. They could have come into contact with someone who was exhibiting signs. They themselves could have been presenting some symptoms, or something that we learned about a call or something that they were on that we, and as an abundance of caution, we would ask them to do that until we make sure that they are in the clear. Thus far, we've been very, very fortunate that we've had no officers to test positive for the virus. As a part of our operational response to the COVID-19, all non-essential employees are now working from home. The officers, when they arrive to work, of course, being essential personnel, we take their temperature at the beginning of the shift. Again, with the goal in mind here that if someone is having some of the symptoms, we don't want to take the chance on contaminating or getting the actual entire shift sick. So we continue to do that. We procedures in place to prevent oncoming and offgoing shift contamination. So they have certain doors that they come in the Patrol East, where they do the roll calls to keep that interaction again at a good distance from each other. We're sending many of our non-emergency, non-ongoing types of calls are going to our eServe teleserve platform that you all are familiar with. As you are aware, we have been testing that platform for about 60 days or so, and we're ready to go in full bloom with that, right about the time when we started with the COVID-19. So we had actually had an opportunity to work out some of those kinks with that platform before we were fully using it. And it's been really, really beneficial for us. There's no change in our response to priority one calls. Those are the emergency calls, violent crime, ongoing types of things, and what we need to respond as a priority. Those calls are still respond to the same way. There is no change to our response to an in-progress call. All domestic are considered still to be a priority call. The shift lieutenants will assign a supervisor to direct some of the calls to eServe, teleserve. Again, we're trying to triage some of these calls to make sure that we're sending police officers on something that's absolutely essential. Property damage, auto accidents will be dispatched as normal. And then traffic enforcement will be done to a limited basis to all but a serious infraction. An example of that would be a DUI. Officers are encouraged to handle the calls outside of the residence where they go. So sometimes we may ask the public to actually step outside to meet us, or they may do it from their vehicle. It is depending upon totality of circumstances. And then in all instances where appropriate, our officers have the appropriate personal protective equipment that they need to protect themselves on these calls. A little bit about the data. Overall, our crime has been about flat when you go back and look at February the 25th through March 17th, through March 16th. Our calls for violent crime, there were 24 offenses, 50 for property crime, for a total of 74. And then we look at that same period of 3/17 versus April the 7th, there's about a 1% difference between those two. So we haven't seen a significant spike in crime. In fact, the past 3 weeks consecutively, we've had our crime to go down. Shots fired has been up a little bit. Our shooting incidents overall is about 25% down. Shooting victims is about 40% down. Dispatch calls is about a 6% decrease in that. And then officer initiated is of course down because we're limiting what we interact with. That's down about 33%. And call total is down about 14%. Arrests are down about 53% for the agency, and that's kind of a summary of our COVID-19. If you'll go with me now, Councilman Majoke, into the slides here. Just a brief overview here before we go into the budget. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
I said, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. So let's start with slide number 3. We already went through the mission statement. Here you can see a brief overview of where we are with crime and community policing for the year of 2019. If you look at the slide there to the left, you can see the 89,000 calls for service in our top left, and then other calls dispatched, 63,000, officer initiated 44,000. Part 1 crimes for the city, when you talk about that, that's divided between property crime and violent crime. 20% of our crime in our city is actually violent crime. And then when you look at that violent crime number, 67% of those violent crime numbers are actual aggravated assaults. When you take a deeper dive into the aggravated assaults, nearly 30% of the time, it involves a gun or a knife. To the other side of that, the majority of our crime, 80%, is actually property crime. Larcenies make up the big piece of that, which of course is thefts. The frustrating part of that, as we continue to beat this drum, is a lot of those crimes, reported incidents, are actually avoidable. People, they kind of make themselves or increase the chance of being a victim because they do things not to secure their valuables. Arrests that were made, there were 7,600 adults that were arrested, 504 juveniles. The juvenile pattern is obviously disturbing when you look at that. Most recently, we were having some issues with some burglaries. And the problem with that is we were arresting the same juveniles for the break-ins, lock them up, they get right back out, and we lock them up again for other break-ins. And they were a part of that pattern that we were having with some of our break-ins. Appearance ticket, we issued 3,500 of those. Physical arrest charges, 8,400. And then when you look at felony misdemeanor, 1,800 felonies, 4,400 misdemeanors. We recovered 211 guns last year. There were 587 search warrants that were served. And then there were 3,200 warrant arrests that were actually made. There were persons trained for CIT, which is the crisis intervention training for individuals who are experiencing some kind of mental episode, whether it be a history of mental illness or some kind of substance abuse issue going on with the individual. We had, prior to that, we had 42 individuals that were trained in the CIT. We have an additional 12 officers that have received that training, and we continue that training here in 2020. Of course, we went through the reorganization of the police department. That was significant for us. The city was divided into the 3 patrol divisions. You're aware of that. There were 3 key policies that we put out: interactions with transgender individuals, our use of force, which was well documented, and then also the officer violator interactions. Our community engagement, we have pride ourselves on that when challenged or questioned about community policing, that we should be able to provide tangible examples of where our definition of community policing has 3 pillars: prevention, problem solving, and partnerships. And you can see the number of organizations that we've worked with throughout the year, including increasing our social media outreach, creating the Office of Public Relations, and then also our continued strong partnership with the assembly leaders. You're well aware of the public forums that we had. Many of you attended multiple public forums that we had during the year. There were 5 forums that we had, including working with City Hall. Those were very beneficial, even though the first one, St. Lucis, got off with a bang. We still felt like that it was very, very valuable to have that. Go with me to slide 4, please. So staffing, one of the things that you all commonly question us about, I believe even Councilman Majoke, when you came in, you said, Chief, you have 400 and some police officers. Isn't that enough officers? Don't you have enough? So when you get to looking at this, when you think of 400 police officers, yeah, that is a lot. But we ask a lot of 400 plus police officers. And it hasn't been very long that we've been at that number. So currently we have 397 officers that are on the street. There are 31 officers currently in this recruit class that I really, really want to tip my hat to that training staff, that they have managed to keep that train on the tracks while we're going through this COVID-19, changing to different venues, modifying the schedule without us having to cancel the class, because we can't afford to lose 31 individuals, but we also don't want to unnecessarily put them at harm. So we made the appropriate adjustments to continue to be able to keep that train going down the track. So we still have our 31 candidates going down that continues in that academy. Here's some interesting information. So in 98, there were 527 police officers in the city of Syracuse, serving 151,000 people. And about a 20% reduction of that when you look at where we are today. And our population is also reduced too. It's important to note that. But what you look at as far as the demand for police services, that has not went down. In fact, that has increased, even though we went down. And I'll break down some of the numbers here for you on the next slide. There are a couple of things that have caused us to have these issues, primarily with retention, and then it's also difficult to recruit. But that older tier that incentivized officers almost to where there was a financial incentive for sticking around, that does not exist in the new tier of the pension system. So that incentivizes folks to leave as soon as they are eligible, because they can go and do other things at a reasonable middle age and start a second career. When you go to slide number 5, over the past 3 years, we've hired 3 classes. There was one in July of 2018, one in May of 2019, and then we hired one in January 2020. Of those classes, I'll just give you some demographic information about that. When you look at our Black and brown individuals for those 3 classes, 20 of the 106 individuals, 19% have been minorities. Females have been 23 of 106, which equates to 22%. City residents, 21 of 106, which equates to 20%, have been actual city residents. So we're pretty proud of those numbers. Now, where we sit today, those numbers are our agency still has much room to improve upon that, because I can tell you that as an agency for persons of color, we still sit at only 9% of the police department in comparison to the 25% African Americans that we have in our city. And then our female representation is just a little bit over 6.5%. The national average for that, depending upon what document you read, is anywhere from about 12 to about 15%. So we have work to do in those two areas. Go with me to slide 6. Very, very important information here. So when you look at this 10-year period, 2009 through 2019, here's something that jumps off of the page that I want to painfully step back a little bit in time to talk about something and why I was so passionate about it. So when you look at slide 6, and the thing that I want you to pay attention to, 4 of those 10 years, our attrition rate exceeded the number of individuals hired. 4 out of the 10 years. If you go back and look at that, 5 of the 10 years, there was no class hired whatsoever. So for half that time, there was no class hired. Now, obviously with 18, 19, and 20, the mayors and with this administration, they've hired a class each of those respective years, and that's put us in the position that we are today. We have strong footing today, but we're not at the number that we would like to be, but I can tell you that we are effectively managing public safety issues in our city with the numbers that we're at today. But the reason that I bring that up is because the reason that I was so passionate about needing something from a contractual standpoint in the form of retention, hiring means nothing if the back door is killing you. And you can clearly see if we continue down that path to where we were losing more people than we were actually hiring, it was almost as if we were fighting against ourselves. Another piece of information that's involved with that. So what does that look like from a hiring standpoint between these last 3 classes? These last 3 classes, 2018, 2019, and 2020. In 2018, we had 37 people to retire. In 2019, we had 40 people to retire. 2020, something happened. At the end of 2019, we had that contract on the table, and it was hanging out there almost as if a carrot was dangling to the individuals of this incentive. And we had in 2020, we've only had 5 people to retire. That was the importance of being able to have that in that language. At the same time, too, we hired 5 laterals, and then there were also 19 resignations. So we look at retirees over the 3 years, 82, individuals that resigned, 19, and then you look at the laterals that we added. So if you look at the 106 police officers that were hired either through an academy or with the lateral, we're actually at a plus 10 for 106 police officers hired over those 3 years. That's the importance of retention. You hire 106 people over 3 years, and your net gain is 10 officers. We have to fix retention, or we'll be back here every year frustrated, talking about we're spending all of this money on the police department, and what do we have to show for it? We must fix retention. I digress. Next, slide 7, Joel. Sworn. So you say, well, some of these things, the chief should have a responsibility to make management decisions within the police department, because we can't put everything in the form of a dollar, or everything can't be on the budget, especially to Councilman Bay's points earlier, given some of the circumstances that we've seen. We have to be doing things to try to get the best out of the workforce that we have. We agree with you. So thus far during my administration, we've had 9 positions that were formerly civilian, that we have put a civilian, that were formerly sworn, that we could transition a civilian to do that job. So there are 9 police officers that were now doing traditional police work that were formerly doing what a civilian could do. We have 11 additional positions that we've identified, but we went through an agreement with the PBA that says that as those individuals retire or transfer, we will incrementally begin to put sworn individuals on the street and civilian individuals to be able to take that. One of the big examples of that is when we recently hired 5 individuals to take over our compliance unit that we needed to create as a result of this criminal justice reform, because we had to have individuals to be able to keep up with the administrative demands. So that was part of that. So from next slide, in slide 8, and we're almost done. Population-wise, in case you all did not know, in our North Division, when we begin to separate these classes going forward, when Chief Trudell, I think he was kind of arriving there when we were doing some of the things there originally, we kind of balanced it out across the 3 as far as number-wise how we broke up the police department. Going forward, we have to be data-driven, and 42% of our population in these 3 divisions live in the North Division. 21% are in our Southwest, 37% are in our Southeast. Our crime, when you look at our CompStat reports, the reported incident-wise, of course, they're more in the North because it's a bigger section. And when these classes continue to go solo, we will have to begin to break up those officers based upon what the data is telling us. We've also created a civilian advisory groups. We have 1 for each division. If you all would like to be copied on the meetings that we had with them, we had our first meeting with them earlier this year. We meet with them quarterly. So I put together an advisory group that represents each of the 3 divisions, that when we're having a moment or we need to get out information, we need to partner with a neighborhood, we need someone to help us with something. We have formal stakeholders in each of the 3 divisions that we can contact 8 to 10 people in that section to say, help us get out this information. We have in May of next month, we have 3 meetings coming up. If you'd like to be invited to those meetings, please reach out to us, let us know, and we'll make sure that you receive those invitations. Let's go to slide 9. Quick glance at this. This just kind of gives you a picture of what our uniform patrol kind of looks like from the way they're divided with the 3 shifts. The A-Watch is we have staggering times that they come in. Those times are at 10 and 11 p.m. They get off at 6 and 7. There are 58 officers on that shift. On the B-Watch, it's at 6 a.m. and 7 a.m., and they get off at 2 and 3 p.m. The C-Watch is the middle of the day, our most active shift. It's at 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. They get off at 10 and 11, and there's 70 officers on that shift. Slide 10. Some more information is kind of just of a narrative that we think it's important that you understand about your police department. The number of officers of staff has decreased in CID, partly because
the schedule, those numbers you gave us, you said 58, 56, 70. So if I add them up and I get 184, I divide by 397, I get 46% working patrol. Is that wrong?
That's wrong, because that doesn't include sergeants, lieutenants, and then there's K9 units, there's other units that are part of patrol that are not listed in those numbers there.
Okay.
Stick with me there. I know you got the same thing I have, Mr. Rudd, attention deficit disorder. So take a little medicine and hold on.
Try not to take up the whole hearing.
I got you. We're almost done. So our CI, we've lost 20% of our staffing there in CID because we have to keep the front line of the police department adequately staffed. But that hurts us because you can see in 2011, the number of cases that we took in CID versus 2019 is virtually the same. They do a great job with 80% plus clearing rate in 2017 through 2019. But these units that used to be in CID are no longer there. So that work has to be kind of split up amongst those detectives, and that's financial crimes, the DA liaison, domestic violence unit, and our computer forensics unit. Gang violence task force on slide 11. You can see their arrests. I won't even go through each one of those. You can see that for yourself. We've merged that unit now. They are a part of the SID unit because with many of the individuals that we target for violent crime purposes, the majority of them, their revenue source is drugs. So we believe it provides a more seamless communication between those 2 organizations. SID, there are 31 individuals in there. They too have been broken down and lost many things that they were responsible for. They no longer do the forfeiture section, telecommunications, the intel part, the daily prostitution details. Now that's done solely on overtime. And then the organized gambling and then participation in the AG's investigation. Cops cameras, you always want to know about those. They're on page 12, which is our next to last page. There are 505 cops cameras. The cameras have a 5-year lifespan. Several of the cameras are more than 5 years old. The estimated cost to replace them is about $420,000. We added 72 cameras. You can see where those cameras went this past year. And then we currently have one officer working on the camera repairs. And then on your final page, you can see where those cameras are listed by mapping. That's my brief overview. We will now take your questions.
I can start if nobody have anything.
Oh, how did I know that Mr. Bay would have something? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Just inside the budget, page 179, and I often wonder about this under forfeiture cases process.
Hang on for a second, sir. Budget page 179.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Right toward the bottom, technical operations section, forfeiture cases process. I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would assume that under seizure or forfeiture, if I'm getting the terminology correct, there may be a certain amount of money and/or assets that's collected. And correct me if I'm wrong for assuming some of that can legally be incorporated into expense and operations. Am I right?
It cannot. Some of that can be used to further investigations or things associated with, for example, if it was a drug seizure, you can use it in the furtherance of drug investigation. You can use it in the furtherance of training for something. You can use it in the furtherance of equipment. But there are guidelines for all of those dollars. And one of the things that they're very, and I don't know if this is what you're alluding to, we can't supplant that money in place of budget money. It strictly prohibits that.
Right. I understand that it can't go into the city's budget. But if I'm hearing you correctly, then cash or vehicles, for example, cannot be used, except as you mentioned, for the furtherance of an investigation or something to that effect. I mean, essentially what you do is investigation and security patrol anyway, but it can't be used for those purposes. So money and vehicles specifically, for example, cannot be used for investigation or used for any other.
It can be used for the furtherance of investigation. It can be used for the furtherance of investigation.
Right. Yeah, but you're clarifying that it cannot be incorporated nor considered a part of your budget, which I understand.
Correct.
Right. My second question is relative to page. This is my last one for now. If I have any more after that, I'll get back to you. Page 186.
Okay.
Contractual and other expenses. Yeah, you have quite the increases from fiscal year 20, second half of fiscal year 20 into 21. And that's across the board in that respect. And some of it I probably can figure out, but can anybody provide an explanation for? I mean, some of those things are going from 0 to 100, so to speak. One thing that particularly jumps out at me is operating supplies and expenses going from 372,000, almost on average, to 1.7 million.
Great question. So I will give you my general response to that. And I believe Mary Bosler is on here that can give you probably a more technical response to this. It is my understanding that many of those things that you see, to use your verbiage, that go from 0 to almost this enormous number, it's not actually an addition to the budget. It is where the budgets were captured in multiple places previously, and now we've divided our budget pretty much into sworn and civilian. So what you've seen is the combining of those sheets now showing up in one location, whereas in the past they may have showed up on 3 different sheets. Mary Boschler, are you on here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Could you
Yeah,
expound on?
We had 4 different bureaus in the previous year, and we put those down into 2 bureaus, one where all the uniform officers are and one where all the civilians are. It's going to be much easier to look at and to do analysis stuff during the new fiscal year.
And so if I'm saying this right, then the change is because that doesn't actually come into effect after July 1, 2021?
Yeah, the 1st of July it goes into effect.
Gotcha.
So if you looked at page 185, the page before, there's a bunch of things that went from something to 0. But I do think it makes it hard for us to understand what's changing. So is there some kind of reconciliation that shows what last year's budget would have looked like under these rules and then compare it to the new budget so we can actually tell what changed?
Not in this document. We would have to create something for you. And we will try to do that. I'll try to put something together in the next couple days.
Please, thank you.
That's all I have for now. If I have anything else, I'll raise my hand.
Yes, sir.
Chief, I have a couple questions, if it's okay.
Yes, sir.
Agree. One just real quick thing. I know one of your slides, slide 8, has the different leadership for the different, north, south, or whatever. Is there any way this could go on the city website just because, or, at least the police website, just because I know, sometimes people move into different roles, and if it can be live and that way it can always be updated, I think that'd be helpful for us to be able to give it out to.
Sir, I believe this stuff is on our website. If you look at our CompStat report, you can see this stuff. We put that out weekly.
On the CompStat?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just on it now in like the contact us section. I don't see it there. So we can talk offline about that, but that was just one thing.
If you're on our website, you go over to the far left side over there and you scroll down to where it says CompStat.
Yeah.
You see CompStat? And then go to the top and then pull the most recent report, which will be from last Tuesday. We publish this every Tuesday.
Okay.
And all of these maps and then the crime that corresponds with them are on there. And we tried to dress it up. We have a new person over here that's touched it up a little bit even more. Jesse Cass is over, but we tried to make that very civilian friendly as well. So I welcome any feedback that you have on anything that's too much police jargon to where the public can clearly understand what's going on in their neighborhood.
Okay, I appreciate that. The next thing I want to do is just go through the professional services section. So I guess I'm looking at page 350, and if we could just kind of run through those lines just to get a better understanding of those.
Page 350.
Yes, sir. So even if you just have like, what, 2-second explanation of what each is for, be helpful. Some of them are bigger numbers.
Hang on, I'm trying to find my document that corresponds with a 350.
This is the professional services for field services. If it's helpful, maybe I can just read off what I'm seeing, and then you might know off the top of your head what.
Okay.
So the first one's $10,000 per physician contract.
I'm still not seeing what you have, sir. Lieutenant Lutz, are you familiar which document he's referencing that's in our documents? I don't see a page 350
document that goes 210 to 210,000 to 920,000. So it might be one of these things where the changes are more than, it might not be new. They might, I don't know what, it does look weird because it changes so much, but like it's got police chaplains, interfaith perks, K9 vet fees, cops, support, engineer.
whoever is typing, please mute their phone. Thank you.
I don't have a document that's, is there any one of my folks on here that has the same document he's referencing?
Chief, can you open the Excel document that I sent you earlier this afternoon?
Okay.
You do that and go under, have this as sworn detail.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
From there, if you scroll down to line 323, that's where the list that Councilor Green is referring to begins.
Okay, so I'll just go through ones I don't know off the top of my head and maybe give an explanation. So there's one that's cop support engineer for 25,000.
What that is, that's additional support for us to maintain the cops' cameras. As Chief Buckner mentioned earlier, we have one officer assigned to that duty. Now that we have 500 plus cameras, he cannot handle it on his own, so we employ Cedar Path to supplement the work he's doing.
Okay. The Finn Institute for 45,000.
That's our folks that we've been working with for the surveys. Is that correct, Mr. Lutz?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And can I jump in on that one, on the Finn Institute? Because if I'm not mistaken, we have been working with the Finn Institute for quite a while. And I'm at this point now, I talk a lot about RFPs because we have our own educational institutes here. So maybe we can revisit this. Because Finn Institute is about 20 years worth of work we've been doing with them. And I think it might be time to open the door a little bit broader.
Okay.
The next question is that a Pulse network consultants for 357,000.
Pulse is the, hang on.
It's our network service provider, sir. Those are the folks who help our IT.
Computer, yep. We also just increased one of those individuals there. There was a position that we had been posting, I'm told, I believe, for some lengthy period of time, and because of the salary in the private sector, we could not attract a person for that. So we had transitioned the funds that we had for that position that was posted, and were able to get an additional consultant assigned to us from this organization.
So it might be a case where the money is just in different places, but is this 357,000 significantly different than what we spent last year on it, or is it similar?
The budget for fiscal year 24 MA Pulse was either 290 or 295,000.
Paper it shows up as zero. So something is like, we need a different reconciliation either from Mary or somebody within PD.
Okay.
Microsite Development for 50,000.
That is a part of our recruiting platform that we will have in addition to where the city is working on all of our websites through our city government. We plan to have a microsite specifically for recruiting that's behind that you will be able to go to directly to that, which is part of kind of a best practices from a recruiting standpoint.
Okay. And then the last one, recruiting and public relations consultant for 100,000.
We currently only have the one individual that's in there. We had two. We recently promoted one, which was another sworn officer. So rather than putting another sworn officer back in that position for the two individuals. We wanted to get a civilian to be able to help with that, to again have as less police gun badges doing things that civilians can do as we can in the organization.
Okay. Okay, that's all the questions I had, Councilor Matou.
Do we have any more questions?
I do have a question. Since you were talking about recruitment, I was wondering, Chief Buckner, from the outreach that you do, that it's pretty intense, to applications, how many people actually apply, and how many get in from those?
We'll get you the numbers. You may not know, Councilwoman Pantiagua, county civil service actually runs that portion of the hiring process.
Okay.
We assist with going out and trying to do some of the classes to prepare individuals for that, but that is actually put on by the county. We can get those numbers, but that is actually county civil service information.
Okay, I was just wondering. Thank you.
Chief, I tell you that we have a significant number of people that fill out the information to take the exam and that do not show up.
Oh, okay.
Councilor Majok, I have a few questions. This is Pat Hogan. Councilor?
Go ahead, Councilor.
Chief, thanks for that presentation. I have to mention the patience of your first deputy chief and a couple of your captains when they tried to explain to me that the five council districts fitting into your 3 districts as far as police patrol goes, because occasionally we overlap each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to ask you just a few questions. It seems like you're going to be coming in about $2 million less than as far as your sworn budget goes for on page 186. You're projected to come in at 28 million and you were adopted at 30. So I would commend you on that. I also noticed, I forget the page, it looks like you're going to about 20 more community service officers. Could you maybe expound on that a little bit?
Well, on the community service office, the CSOs stays the same. What you're seeing is, again, back to the example that we gave Councilman Bay, they were counted in 2 different locations previously. Now all of those civilians will be on one document.
Okay. And one other question now. It says your total number is at 464. Of course, you don't have it. You said you had 397.
Well, it's actually 428, but I believe we have one retired since this. I think we're at 427, counting 31 in the academy.
The proposed amount of officers is 464, and that's what's budgeted. It's budgeted for, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
So in other words, we're going to have about 40 positions that are going to be fully funded and not filled, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. That's all I got. All the questions I got.
I'll try again with my percent of patrol. So if I took your number, 184 officers, the 58 plus the 56 plus the 70, and then if I go to page 184 and I look at just the police officer row, I take the 369, but then I say, oh, but you have 60 vacancies or something. You have, if I'm not counting the class. So I just say you've got 300 and I give you 65 vacancies in officers. So I have 304 officers. If I do 4 divided by 304 or whatever, I get like 60%. Does that sound like the right percentage on patrol?
Patrol right now, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 65-ish%.
What's the ultimate goal for patrol?
The ultimate goal is for us to probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 70%.
And then on the diversity, I get that your percentages are better than in the past, but it does seem like the percentages are around 10 overall for the new classes for African Americans, and then the city as a whole is like 30%. So it seems like if we continue to hire at that rate, given that we're below 10% to start, we'll never get sufficiently diverse. I just wondered if you've ever made a hiring schedule that would show you how diverse your classes would have to be in order to achieve some sense of parity with the city over like a 10-year period. Like what would classes actually have to look like given the existing composition of the force to start?
I would start that I would respectfully disagree with you that our classes, the 3 classes that we've hired, have been in the neighborhood of 10%. The average of the 3 classes that we've hired has been in the neighborhood of 19%. We currently sit at just below 10% overall, but the 3 classes that we've hired, we've exceeded 10%.
The 3 classes are 8%, 14%, and 11%. So I was averaging in my head. I didn't do it on math, but it's, I don't know, 11%. I'll give you. But the city's still 30. That's just African American. So I mean, you could use the total racial ethnic minorities. Like I think the city's 45% not white. So we're at 17. We're at 20% at best in hiring. So it just seems like, given that, we're never going to become like. I just think it would be insightful to show what hiring should be if we were to actually become sufficiently diverse over a 10-year time period, because the numbers would be really different.
Well, we would certainly, in order to get to that 25%, we would have to probably at least exceed the 25% in consecutive classes to make measurable progress towards that number. But I will tell you this: currently, there's preference given to the individuals on the written exam for African Americans. We have the consent decree that's in place that we are going by that language, and then we have the individuals that actually show up to test. And when we do so, every class that I have personally been a part of, we always start out with a significant number. Well, not a significant number. We start out with a respectable number of African American candidates. We lose them majority during the background portion of our process. I've heard a significant number of different things from a variety of people that we were doing or not doing in order to genuinely go out and recruit minorities. I can tell you that from a recruitment standpoint, from us, the energy that we put, if you look at where we spend our dollars on the types of events that we are attending, any objective person would look and see that we are going above and beyond to try to find Black and brown people for this department. Here are the hurdles. Number one, you have to find people who have the desire. That's your biggest hurdle. Number two, once they have the desire, do they have the background to be able to pass our vetting process? Those are the 2 major hurdles that you and I can talk.
I know it's a priority for you. I know it's a priority for the mayor and deputy mayor and everybody else. I don't really need all the reasons why, but I do think having the math in front of you of what it would have to be would be insightful to just inform people, because I think it would be shocking to see how high the number should be if we're to like restore the legacy issue of deficient hiring of minorities for a long period of time that has nothing to do with you. But I just think it would be helpful. And then,
Councilor Rudd, this is Sharon. You're absolutely right. We're climbing up a steep hill to catch up with where we should be in respect to the population of our city.
Right. And then last, you mentioned your target would be roughly 70% for patrol. I'm just curious if you have a sense of what percentage of overtime dollars get spent on patrol, and if you have a target for what you think overtime spending should be in terms of patrol in the long run, because I understand that most overtime spending is not on patrol.
We are in the process of taking a very intimate dive into our overtime dollars. Obviously, me coming off of my first year, it's one thing to look at a spreadsheet. It's another to see your organization in operation. I think that we will have some measurable success with reducing overtime this next year, but we're always going to have a significant overtime budget because the demands that we're asked of externally, in contrast to the resources that we have internally, we will always exceed our general fund budget. Overtime will have to be a significant piece of that. So a prime example, you called me a couple of times or text me a couple of times this weekend, and you and a number of people reached out to the mayor and other folks wanting to know what are we doing about these individuals on the motorcycles and the four-wheelers and those kinds of things. Well, when we run details to do that, we put together a sergeant and about 10 officers to go around trying to get these individuals to stop that, whether that be issuing a citation, seizing or towing these vehicles. Those individuals on overtime, because I can't take 10 people out of calls for service in order to go chasing 16-year-olds on motorbikes. The pools, we're asked to do that. There are a countless number of things that we're asked to do that I can't take people from my front line in order to do the job, but the responsibilities are still there. But I agree with everyone that has said that we have to reduce our overtime budget, and I think that starts with the leadership of the Syracuse Police Department.
My last question, because I know we're going to run out of time. I do think there's a need for overtime. I don't think there's a need to have no overtime. That wouldn't make sense. And I think you're doing everything in your power to create a culture of accountability around all the spending that happens, including overtime. And I think a part of that is the new payroll timekeeping systems. So I was just curious as to if you had a brief, is that moving forward? Are we still looking for like a summer adoption?
It is, and part of that from a technology standpoint that we asked for in this contract, which was the, let me see what the name of that is. What's the piece, LUTs that we need for Chronos? The telestaff?
Chief, this is Frank Leva. Yes, telestaff would be the component you need.
Yes, sir. So we put that in our budget, Councilman Rudd, and the Chronos that, as you heard Frank there, is our point person on that. He's aware of what we have, to have a paper product that we're producing right now. Just to give you an example of that, Mr. Rudd, of we share your frustration. COVID-19 illuminated a lot of things. And one, it illuminated that our city government is very strong because we've been able to survive during this. But we were not even able to give people things so that they knew how many vacation days, how many time they had left in balances, those kinds of things, because we're still doing way too many things on paper. This Chronos system across city government, everyone is patiently waiting on this, but we all need it. And one of the things that I certainly think that it will help is give us more administrative responsibility to be able to say exactly where our dollars are going and how they're being spent.
All right. Thank you. I applaud your efforts and good. Keep working hard. Thank you.
Chief, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Go back to slide 9 for me.
Okay. Yeah. All right, go ahead, sir.
So I see there in the North District, there is 58 officers. And then I see that there is shift time, which is 10 to 6 a.m. Now, with that 58 officers, how many for a shift at a time? Do you know?
Well, sir, the 58 is for that watch, for the A watch. And on the shifts, staffing, let me get you the staffing for, and these are the minimum staffing numbers for.
So what I'm asking is, so say in a given day.
Yes, sir.
They say like today. Is there a standard number?
Yes, sir.
Say from 10 a.m., from 6 a.m. to the following 6 a.m. in the 24-hour given time?
Yes, sir. So minimum staffing for A watch, sir, is 28 officers. Minimum staffing for B watch, I'm sorry?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, minimum staffing for A watch is 28 officers. Minimum staffing for B watch is 28 officers. Minimum staffing for C watch is 32 officers.
Now, is that per the 10-hour time, right? Per 10 hour.
For that
That's
shift. No, it's for that
shift.
8-hour shift, sir. For
Okay.
that 8-hour
So
shift.
28 officers in a shift.
The minimum staffing is 28 for A and B shift, 32 for C. There are some days that we exceed that. There are some days when we're below that. Actually, there's a much more, it probably will confuse you more, which is why we took some of those slides out, but we have a more detailed description of where you can see how 58 officers can be cut down to where you would question, well, why do you not have at least 28 officers to cover this shift? And we were able to show you that, but I took it out because I didn't want to take up too much of your time.
Okay, is there a way you can send that to us? And
I'll get you the complete slides that I originally had. So actually, I believe 43. So we cut it to 13 for you.
okay, thank you. And I know we are a little bit really behind. We are running really behind. And I just want to see maybe in a different document or different narrative that you can let us know some of your proposal for overtime reduction. Just to follow up on Councilor Rudd's point, there a way we can maybe see where your brain is in terms of reducing overtime, some of your proposal in a sense.
Okay.
All right, that should be it for me. The rest of it, I think, should follow up over offline.
Okay.
Any more questions, councilors?
No, sir.
Thank you,
You want
Chief.
to add anything, Chief, or you all set?
I'll have a closing comment. I greatly appreciate the fact that you all certainly have been supportive of the police department, even when we disagree on some things. I, in my mind and my heart, I feel like that you all appreciate and respect our police department. When you look at what they have been able to do just during this COVID-19, the fact that they come to work every day. We haven't had any mass sick call-ins or anything like that. Our sick numbers have still been staying about 5 or 6 a day like we were having pre this incident. These guys literally are putting it on the line, and we appreciate that you all appreciate that. And we always welcome constructive feedback to tell us on how we can do a better job of serving your constituents, and anything that you all can do to help us with that, we appreciate it.
And that's I'm glad you said that, because I think sometimes people don't understand that we have a responsibility, and that should not be confused with where our minds and our hearts are. So thank you.
Yes, sir. But I will tell you that I was a little sore at all of y'all when you voted down my contract, but I did keep you on my prayer list.
Well, you know,
Councilor Rudd needs a lot of prayers, Chief.
Well, Chief, I'm going to jump in here.
Oh, Lord.
The contract may have gotten voted down, but just look at it this way. It spared you from chopping it in half after this COVID-19, because that's what would happen.
since we're looking at least a 20 million in reduction in sales tax, so the irony, Chief.
Talking to the Lord, Chief.
Oh,
that was excellent.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Chief. Everybody. Okay, I think councilors, we don't want to leave because unless if we want to give ourselves 2 minutes before the fire.
Keep it rolling.
Keep it going.
Keep it rolling. All right. All right, Chip Mon, you there? Yep, I'm here. Can you guys all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So did all the counselors, did you guys get my email with the overview of the information for today regarding our staffing and our operational plan?
We did.
You did? Okay. So I know you are pretty familiar with our department, but I'll just go over a couple things. Some of our overview, I'll go over some of our past year's accomplishments, some statistics, and then I'll open the mic up for you guys to talk and ask me whatever questions you would like, and I'll give the answers to you. So, our department, we cover the city of Syracuse, all residential, commercial buildings, all interstates, all streets inside the city. We provide fire protection and fire prevention services. And besides fire protection and fire prevention services, we also provide EMS services, which is basic life support, advanced life support. We have an advanced life support ambulance, and we also have a statewide disaster response with our emergency medical services. Our firefighters are highly trained in this medical field. We also have a technical rescue squad. They're located over on West Street. They go to every car accident. They go to every elevator that may be stuck in any building. They do all of our confined space rescues, all of our collapse rescues, all of our trench rescues, and they also can respond statewide for any disasters. And we also have another specialty company, our hazardous materials company. They're located over on Geddes Street. They're certified, and our team are pretty much the experts in this whole region. We respond to 3 different counties for any physical, chemical, biological hazards, any unknown powder. They also team up with our rescue company for any type of collapse hazards with confined space. And just to get a little bit more deeper, when we go to a fire, our main goal is to protect life. So we go in, we make sure we search every building for any victims. We assume every building is occupied. We extinguish a fire, and at the same time, we always try to salvage everybody's personal property. We initiate medical care for the victims when we find them. All car accidents, we provide medical care on scene for all the car accidents, and we also stabilize the vehicle for the people that are inside. These car accidents use specialized tools, otherwise known as a jaws of life, to get access to the trapped victims. Our rescue team is one of the highest trained companies in the region, anywhere north, south of us, east and west. We have great specialty companies along with the rest of our fire department. And besides the other technical rescue, yes.
This is Sharon. Can you speak up a little? You might be too far from your mic on you.
Okay, can you hear me better now? You guys hear me okay now? Okay.
That's better.
Okay, besides some of the other technical rescues, we also do swift water rescue, ice rescue, high, low angle rope rescues, any kind of building collapses. We are the experts that are in this area to go and make sure that any trapped people, we stabilize the buildings, any mass casualty incidents like an active shooter, large bus accidents, pileups on the car accidents on the highway. We are the ones that are responding to those. All responses with police agencies like shootings, stabbings, any domestics, traumas, we are the first responders on those calls. With all of our industries, anybody that's having an emergency, any type of entrapment, if a hand gets stuck in a machine, our members go and we provide assistance for them. All responses at the airport, any crashes or any type of incidents at the airport, we respond to fire alarms, medical alarms, and any incoming planes that are projected to not land safely. That's one of the things we also do. We also do vehicle lock-ins and lockouts, and we are the rescue agency for any large construction project. So in the future, when 81, whenever that starts, if anybody's trapped, high, low, any injuries going on during that particular construction project, we will be the first responders. So each of the things we do requires a specific set of skills and tools and equipment. Our EMS, we go to any type of critical life-saving calls, trouble breathing, chest pains, Anybody that needs cardiac arrest, respiratory arrest, we go to all those types of calls. We're on staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. We have 72 firefighters on duty. That's including the airport. We're strategically located throughout the city with 11 firehouses, and our response times are typically around 3 minutes. When you call 911, I think it's one of the best parts about our fire department is the manpower that we send and how fast we get there to mitigate the hazard. So our response time is pretty much right around 3 minutes. Next, I'll get into some of our past year's accomplishments. I'll be brief. There's a ton of things I'm proud about our department. The very thing that I'm most proud about is our life-saving actions that our firefighters demonstrate on alarm scenes. They face some really difficult situations at fires, and when you look back at the history of our department, when you have 45 firefighters who have died in the line of death, line of duty, and they died doing what our firefighters today do, and it's something that I'm really proud of, some of the actions that they've taken on calls at fires, whether they're on medical alarms, whether they're on those medical calls I told you with full arrest, or on motor vehicle accidents. So I think it's always an accomplishment, and we always keep training and look forward to the future to make sure we can provide that service. Another thing I'm really proud of, in the history of our department over the last few decades, we've been reduced with a lot of different finances, from manpower to operating, and just to be able to find ways to manage our costs, to provide our taxpayers still with the critical services that we need. And that's on top of the inflation of fire service equipment, which goes typically every year and increases 3 to 8%. So we have a great team that they make $1 stretch into $100. I mean, they are really good at finding deals and purchasing. And I know many of you have helped me with one of our biggest issues when I became the chief, was our apparatus. That's just one of the topics that I'm very proud about, which those firefighters that are over in our maintenance division, over since 2018, 2019, and the apparatus that you approved this year, using refurbished parts and reusing some of our old fire trucks, we saved close to $1.7 million on all the fire apparatus that we saved, which is almost more than our operating budget that I'm asking for in this next year's budget. So we've been trying to do our part with saving the taxpayers money, and at the same time actually providing the service. Next, I'll get into our fire prevention. Chief Elton Davis, he's in charge of that. We've answered every request from the community to engage in fire prevention and fire education. Our personnel take this very seriously due to witnessing firsthand the destruction of fires. We've interacted with all 36 city schools, all Catholic and private schools located in the city. And right now, I'm proud to say we're on the verge of a program over at PSLA, which is going to help the students that are over there get more familiar with our fire service. We're in talks with OCC. So what the plan is to give those students an opportunity to get nationally certified in Firefighter 1, which is a national certification, which you need to do to become a firefighter, to actually go into structures, and certification in Firefighter 2. I've been working with the superintendent, Bob Leslie. I'm pretty sure many of you know Bob Leslie from the school district. So we've been doing a lot of stuff in the schools, and very shortly, the beginning of next school years, we will have a presence in the schools. And at the same time, we're going to try to get those kids that are over there in the school to start getting college credits for their firefighter degree. We have visited over 200 community groups, some such as Syracuse United Neighbors, pretty much many churches, little leagues. I have a list of different places we've been to. We've had tons of interactions. Our safety smoke trailer, over the last 2 years, it's been deployed, and the previous year was the busiest year it's ever been, and the last year that we're working in right now, last summer, was the next busiest year. We have our smoke detector program, which this past year we installed over 2,500 smoke detectors in residence. The last 2 years, in 2018 and 2019, and previous to when I was the chief, we had an open house, which we taught the community. The first one was down on the south side on Salina Street. The year before was up on Genesee Street, on Westcott Street. This past year was over on the north side. And this year we added the first ever parade. We had 300 residents and it was all about fire prevention and how to keep safe. I talked about our apparatus. Those are what I'm most proud about as our interactions. I know some of the things we've also been working on with the council's help is reconstructing our codes, our part in the codes. When I became the chief, we were down close to 300 permits on backlog before this COVID crisis hit. I'm happy to say that all the building permits that were coming through our office, we have no backlog in building permits, and we were only down 3 fire alarm permits. So we've done a lot of work trying to get the people in place to actually review those processes. We've been working with Jake Deshaw, Ken Townsley, and it's been a real collaborative effort, but it's one of the things that I'm most proud of. We've actually put a lot of time and effort into that. So right now, those are the things that I'm most proud of. Those are the things that I think every year we strive to do. And all the things I talked about, it provides a huge benefit. I know most of you know about our ISO 1 class rating. Because we have such a fire service that has great on-duty personnel, our response times, training, policies, and procedures, and along with our code enforcement, this has given us a class 1 rating with the Insurance Services Organization. And for those of you who don't know, the insurance companies use this low rating when calculating fire insurance. And because of our highly recognized fire department, it lowers the community and any businesses, it lowers their insurance rates in the community. So it actually attracts businesses. So there's only 241 ISO class 1 fire departments in the nation, and we're only one of them in New York State. So it's one of the things that I'm very proud of, but it all goes back to our manpower, our response times, the different policies and procedures that our command staff, and it goes to our firefighters who are on the line every day making it happen. So that's one of the things that's a huge benefit of a department that runs as efficiently and does such a good job like we do. When we have a structure fire, that automatically depletes half of our on-duty staff. It usually takes 34 firefighters. Any fire that extends more than 1 or 2 rooms, we call in more firefighters. So if there's 2 fires separately going on, it pretty much depletes our on-duty manpower. But our chiefs that are running the day-to-day, they do a good job of managing our resources to make sure we can handle the situation and get back in service to handle every call. Every call that comes in, we answer every call. There's no call that does not get answered with our fire department. So as of right now, I have the handout that I sent out to you. If you guys have any questions on that or with the documents that were into the budget, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Counselors, anybody with questions?
Yeah, Councilor Majoka, I can start. That's okay.
All right, go ahead. Thank you, Chief. Go ahead.
Okay, Chief, this is Councilor Green. My first question is looking at page 190. This is, oops, sorry, wrong page. Well, one of the questions I know I do have, looking at the professional services, the third-party review, I know you put $50,000 in there. Can you walk us through what the plan is for this year? I know you've done a really good job with the permits. Are we going to try to outsource that still? What's our long-term plan for that?
So when I first got here, we had 1 person reviewing all of our plans. We were trying to hire a second fire protection engineer. It was really difficult to hire somebody with that high level of education. And at that time, that 1 person ended up resigning and going to take a job at one of the private companies that review plans locally. So at that time, I called a few people that I knew. We had a meeting and my back was against the wall. Well, our department's back was against the wall. And at a particular point in June of last year, we had nobody to review plans. So it was my idea to reach out to these places like CNS, VIP structures. Pretty much I reached out to anybody that could review plans and say, we need some help. Can you review some of our plans? And just to get us to the point where we repivoted from trying to get fire protection engineers, and we actually ended up hiring some plan reviewers, which they've been working for
close to 5 to 6 months now. So, but during that gap, it was my goal just to be able to keep the permits being reviewed. So at that time, I think we put $100,000 limit because we weren't sure who we were going to be able to hire. It's a occupation that not many people were excited about coming to Syracuse to do. We were actually hunting down people, going on LinkedIn's and basically stalking people to be of our. I mean, that's how one of our fire protection engineers. We went on his LinkedIn page, wrote him a message and say, "Hey, can you come work for us?" And actually, he's working for us now. So we've done everything we can to try to keep these permits rolling. But back to your question, it was a stopgap. I think this year we're just looking to reduce that money, but I think it's a good card to have in our pocket to be able to go to a third-party review if we get swamped, if there's tons of reviews coming in, or if somebody resigns. Our goal is always have a bench to be able to have somebody to do some of these reviews. So I know that was a long answer, but it's been a long process, and I kind of wanted to let you know how everything kind of unfolded.
No, that makes sense. Thanks a lot, Chief. That's all I have.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Is the timekeeping system on the horizon for the fire department?
So one of the things I think our department, it seems like we're ahead of most situations that are going on. So we had a records management system that when I became the chief, it was something that I used every day when I was on the line, and the system was broken. I think I brought it up a bunch of different times to the council. The only reason our records management system we had in 2017 and 2018, I think the only reason it was still in existence was because the Syracuse Fire Department was using it. The county was supposed to own the system. They backed out of it. So before the city actually got the money for this telestaff and this Chronos, we had to move over to something differently. So we ended up getting a new records management system, which is called Image Trend. And at the time, this was before we knew the city was going to get money from the state and that we were going to go in this direction. But it was one of the things that was a critical issue in our fire department. We ended up picking a staffing schedule called Crew Sense. So it's just like Telestaff. And the thing is, the county was going to stop supporting the systems we were using basically at January 1st of this year. And all of our records that we keep, they're mandated records, all of the alarms we go on, any call, they have to be reported to a state in a certain amount of time. So our backs were against the wall. So we had to get a system in place by January 1st. Our team worked on that for almost 15 or 16 months. They had that in place by November. So we have this plan, we have this program called Crew Sense. It's very similar to Telestaff. Telestaff was much more expensive, and we had the opportunity to buy Telestaff, but because it cost so much, we went with the less expensive option of Crew Sense. But once the city gets up and running with Telestaff, our Image Trend that we bought will be able to blend in with the Chronos and the Telestaff. So we're just waiting for the city to get up to speed on implementing that with the police department and the other departments. But our team has worked very hard to get this new system in place. And one of the benefits of this new system is we're going to be able to pull more data, more specific data than ever before. So with the Image Trend and with the Crew Sense. So.
Any more questions?
I have one quick question. In page 197, for 21.
Your audio is breaking up, Counselor. I didn't hear your question.
I'm asking is the salary in the personnel services. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
In the salary,
Yes.
okay. and wages full-time weekly, there's an increase in the proposed for 21. And I was wondering if those are new hires or are those salary increases?
They're both due to the collective bargaining agreement with the wage employees, and some of the employees got a small increase and a raise like everybody citywide also got. The salary, okay. Who is it? And we got.
More questions?
I just have one more answer. There was last year too, we were down some mechanics, and we actually hired 2 different mechanics this year, 2 newer mechanics. I think citywide there was a mechanic shortage. We only have 1 vacancy now, and there was a time last year where we had 3 vacancies at the same time. Thank you.
Councilors, any more questions? Okay, Chief, I see here you have 32 vacancies for this year, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I think from our conversation before, you had said, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had said that vacancy could have, one class of recruits could fill that, right?
Yes, I think we're gonna bring on 26 recruits this coming year, and that will fill most of those spots. So we plan on having a class of 26. We'll probably hire more initially because kind of what Chief Buckner alluded to. For whatever reason, our goal is to never lose any people in recruit training, but ultimately, if you look back, we always lose 1 or 2 people, if not more than that. So our plan is to hire 26 firefighters.
And is that the similar? Is that this with a similar issue of background checks and stuff like that? Does that apply to you?
No, I think we actually canvass a lot of firefighters, and they actually make it through the process. But once they get into the training academy and they realize the rigor of just being a firefighter and all the things that they have to do, some of them just aren't able to live up to what they need to do to get through the academy. So the last class we hired in 2018, I think we only lost 2 or 3 people, but.
All right. Just like I had asked from Chief Buckner, yes. Is there a way you can put together maybe a protocol just to see what are your proposals to reduce overtime and share it with us?
Yep, I can speak, and I know you just were elected. I think our overtime is a direct reflection of how many firefighters we have. If you go to page 4 of the pamphlet that I sent you, 86% of our overtime is paid to the officers working on the line. That means they're riding on the fire truck. 92% of our whole sworn staff actually work on the line. There's only 8% of our firefighters that support what I'm doing in the office. 92% of all of our firefighters work on the fire trucks. And so when our numbers are low, like right now they're around 320, somewhere around there, it's gonna make the overtime go up a little bit, but as soon as we hire a class, it's going to reduce the overtime significantly. So they're all the same money. I know there's an overtime line, and sometimes the overtime line people don't like, not just the counselors, but the overtime in general. People don't like that term, but that same money is going to be used for the firefighter salary. So either that money is going to be in the salary line or it's going to be in the overtime line, one way or the other. So our goal is to always try to hire to keep our staff higher, so then our overtime will be lower. This past fiscal year, in fiscal year 19, our overtime numbers were at $4 million. Fiscal year 18, that was the first year I was a chief. It was down to $3.9 million. It was the lowest that I look back almost 10 years. I've never seen overtime that low. So when we hire a class, it's going to dramatically reduce the overtime. When we did our class last time, I got the numbers for you. When we did our class last time, we had approximately, before we hired, we had approximately 335 firefighters. After the class, we had 360 firefighters. And because of that hiring of that class, every week we have meetings where we figure out how many overtimes are needed to cover up the vacancies on the fire trucks. So before the class, we had about 240 shifts per week that needed to be filled with overtime. That once we hired the class, those same overtimes were reduced to either from 70 all the way down to 15, which was a reduced and a percentage wise in overtime. At some points, it dipped all the way down to 94% reduction in overtime. So our staffing is a direct reflect of our overtime line. So once we hire the class, your request of reducing our overtime, it's going to significantly, definitely go down.
And Chief, I think just to be clear a little bit, when you hear me and many other counselors talking about overtime reduction, it's not just a short-term financial cost to the city. It has also long-term cost to it, and by doing that, it's also reduced those long-term costs. One of the things that one of the reasons I'm saying that is, with overtime means that people are putting more time in. They are not taking care of themselves because they are working so hard. So yes, in terms it costs money up front, but long-term wise, it's another cost. That's why we are so adamant about some measures being put in place to be able to mitigate that. So
okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
I can talk about a couple of things now, or I can talk offline. But I think one of the things that our department is very, very good at is health services for our firefighters. Our EAP program. We have a behavioral health team that is a peer-based program that identifies when people are having issues. And I think our program is a model where we actually, when other departments outside the city have issues, we actually deploy some of our firefighters and they volunteer their time to go help other firefighters that are going through some of the same situations that we do. So some of the concerns that you're bringing up are some of the concerns that our firefighters, even before I became a firefighter, the citywide EAP program, the fire department started that program. So some of the things that you brought up, and they're very valid points, but it's one of the things that we work on every day. When there's an issue with a firefighter, we have a team, they go out and they talk to the firefighters, and we have a pretty robust program to identify situations like that. Besides the overtime part, but just when somebody is having issues with work and things like that, whether it's working too much, whether they're family issues, we have a very, very robust program to deal with that.
All right, thank you for doing that. Now, is there anything else you want to add, Chief?
No, I was just going to answer any questions that anybody has.
I think on our part as
I have one, Counselor.
Go ahead, Madam President.
Okay, Chief, I'm going to go back around to the discussions that we've been having for the past month. We're going to go again on our economic issue. So we know that we won't be hiring a new class of police, and we know we won't be starting our sidewalk program. So are you optimistic that you're going to be able to put another class on?
I mean, that's my goal, to continue running business the best we can to provide the protection to the citizens. I know there are a lot of city initiatives that are proposed in this budget. I think our fire safety and the protection that we provide the citizens are one of the top priority in my opinion. And I know there's a lot of different people that have a say in how we move forward financially, but my goal is to continue as normal. We have anticipated 23 people retiring, and I think hiring firefighters is going to fix a lot of things. when you have firefighters, you can put out fires better. You reduce the overtime costs, like we talked about. It's just it's a benefit to the city, and all the different things that our firefighters do off duty, all the volunteer services that they do, all the things that we do on duty with interacting with the public. I think
I understand that, Chief, and I know how valuable our fire department is, because I mean, I respect and applaud the department, but I'm just gonna have to go back to thinking that we're not hiring in any departments right now. We shut down raises, so I'm just kind of a little stuck there on how this class is gonna move forward when we're not moving anything else forward.
well, right now we have, and by June we'll have 36 vacancies. By September there'll be a few more people retiring. So those positions are already funded. So the new class will just go in and take over those positions that are already funded. I mean, it's not additional money. It's not we have 344 firefighters now. It's not as if I had 360 firefighters and I wanted an additional 30. Those are going to backfill for the spots that we currently have funded currently right now, President. So I'm not asking for anything additional. I don't know if that answers your question or.
We'll talk offline, because again, I think the fire department is our most valuable asset, but I have to go back to the police department as well, because we're understaffed with the police department, and we're not putting on another class, and they're a valuable department as well. So I was just curious to how that's going to work.
And Madam President Hudson, I will just add this. I don't believe any department in the city has been cut more than our department has over the last couple decades. Since 1994, we lost 88 budgeted positions. We've lost 10 on-duty firefighter spots. We've closed down firehouses. And we still are finding ways to be efficient with our money. And I think I'll go up against anybody, any municipality in any state, any city. We spend money more efficiently than anybody anywhere. And I think the bang for the buck you get with our fire department is it's unmatched. And I think even with all those reductions over the last few decades, we still have one of the best fire departments in the nation. And you know finances come into play, but at some point we're going to break. I mean, we're at that point now where we've been reduced so much, and I think that's why we have such a great department. There's two reasons I believe that. It's because one, we've been cut so much that, I mean, we've had money in 2017 taken out of our budget to give to the police to hire a new class, and it was given to the land bank. It was taken directly out of our budget. Finances have always been taken out of our fire department, and we still find a way to produce a good product on the street. Even right now during this COVID-19, because the nature of our business, we deal with infectious control and hazardous materials. That's what we do. So because our fire department has been running on the optimum with less people, less finances, when there's ways to go find out where to get new masks, how to get new products, sanitation supplies, we're literally helping everybody because it's what we do all the time. And if our department gets reduced, it's gonna have an effect on many other things besides just the fire department. And it's one of the things I truly believe. I'm not just saying that just to answer your question and to get just to get you to agree with me, but with the reduction of the fire department, you're going to see other things in the city fail, I believe. And the other reason why I believe we're so successful, and I've thought about this myself, like, why are we so good after all these years we've been cut? And the number one reason is because our firefighters come to work, they die if they don't do the right thing. Like, there's no other department, but maybe the police, and there's other departments that do that, but there's no other public service people in the city that have 45 people that have a plaque on the wall. And the more we cut, we're just asking to add more firefighters to that list. And that's what I'm trying to avoid and to provide the service still. So I'm happy to talk offline and go over more specifically the needs of the fire department and how making sure we're funded properly is the best thing for the city and for everybody that has to make a decision in the city. for the long rant.
Thank you.
You all said, Madam President?
Yes, I'm all set.
Okay. Anybody else?
There's two pieces of information I think would be helpful just as we evaluate the big picture of things. So you mentioned how, and I think I've asked for these kind of things in relation to the police department before, but fire seems a little more straightforward because you have 92% who are just manning like trucks in the stations. So you mentioned with the more people you have, the less overtime you need. And so like to some extent you could, and I think we all agree that overtime is necessary. It actually makes sense to have some amount of overtime. And then there's a point at which it doesn't make sense to have that much overtime. It becomes more costly, it becomes too strenuous, it'd be too taxing on the employees and everything. So do you have any kind of model that shows like the optimum number? You know, so like you have a theory of like here's where we want this much overtime, but we don't want too much overtime. And I think to the extent you can model that by showing like we get this many hours per person, having like I don't know what the table of like a staffing schedule or whatever you want to call it, the thing that shows you need this many hours to man these 11 stations 365 days a year, and then you have this much supply from this staffing, so there's this deficit, so you need this much overtime. So I just think that part would be really useful to advocate for yourselves and for us to make a responsible decision.
So I don't have a specific intentional model, but I can say this. And like I said, overtime is always a topic of discussion, and I appreciate it. And I understand the questions and I understand how it looks. To hire a brand new firefighter, between the entry-level salary, the benefits for the collective bargaining agreement, health insurance, we're looking at a brand new firefighter with all those things. The city's paying $80,000 per firefighter. So we can hire this class of firefighters, reduce overtime, or right now the firefighters are working where that salary position would be. So instead of one firefighter manning that position who gets vacation, sick time, all the different things that are allowed based on the CBA, now we have multiple people taking up that $80,000. So when you hire somebody, it depends on who you hire. We don't go around and ask how many kids do some of their firefighters have, but some of the firefighters get hired, they have 6 or 7 kids already, which makes our health insurance go up in some kind of form or some way. I mean, that's probably a discussion I need to have with Mary Bosser to get the numbers of how many children affect that. But over time, I think if it's managed properly, it definitely is 100% the right way to fill some of these vacated spots. But I'm totally agreeable that having a body in that spot is also a good option. But I'm not against hiring overtime to make sure that our bodies are filling the fire trucks. I mean, I don't think it's the worst thing, but it needs to be managed. Unmanageable overtime, I agree, is a waste of the taxpayers' money, and it shouldn't be allowed.
Chief, a lot of your overtime is a result of holding companies after the fire's out, right? At houses and things like that to clean up and stuff.
No, most of the overtime is, like I said, the firefighters, they're given vacation every year.
Filling out shifts, in other words.
Yeah, we have retirements, we have sick times, we have people that are on military leave. We have 13 females once in a while. We have a maternity leave. Like we have one female firefighter right now who's on maternity leave. So there's a number, just like any other workforce, we have reasons why people are off, but some of these are bargain benefits to the firefighters. And in order to maintain a safe level of staffing, especially after we've been reduced for so many years.
So it's essentially because of low staff numbers, correct?
If we were fully staffed with all the authorized positions, you would see no overtime. But at the same time, some other lines might go up. Benefit lines, you'd have more firefighters with more families, more people on the insurance. And so, like I said, it's definitely a discussion, and there's a model probably to have for our police and fire department. But I mean, either you're going to pay salaries and benefits, or you're going to pay overtime if you want to have the service that we provide for the city. And Like I said, our on-duty manpower in the streets, we've been reduced so many spots that any more reduction, I believe, is going to be a severe safety hazard to our firefighters and to the civilians. I mean, I think we've all, when I became the chief, we started a public information office with help of the mayor's office, and we try to put out all the calls we go to. And just 2 weeks ago, we pulled a 90-year-old lady out of a fire. I mean, as soon when we pulled up, there was heavy smoke coming out. Our firefighters went in, rescued her out, and they started CPR immediately. Any reduction of firefighters is going to put people at risk. I truly believe that. And our goal is to staff our fire trucks. We would like to hire the class, but if the class isn't able to be hired, I think some of that money that was put for the class needs to be able to be utilized in the way of overtime if we're not going to staff with a new class.
Chief, you don't have to sell this particular city council. I represent a lot of the neighborhoods that have extremely old houses. They're a nightmare to fight fires in. And you're not only the firemen give all out effort, endanger themselves to get people out of those houses many times. So I'm a big fan of your department. I think you do a great job.
Thank you. And I'd like to say, I think the council has been very supportive of our department. There's been many issues that I brought to you, and every time you guys have been very supportive in moving us forward to keep our firefighters safe so we can provide protection. I'm very happy. I kind of wish we could be sitting in the council chambers because, I mean, the WebEx is okay, but I like coming in and sitting across from you guys and ladies and being able to talk about the issues. And I appreciate all your support that you have given me and the department.
Well, thank you, Chief. I think that should wrap it up for us if all the councils are all set. Well, thank you so much for coming, Chief, and thank you for your dedication and hard work.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Counselor.
Take care.
Thank you.